Greetings and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we sometimes shake, but today stir a variety of cocktails and other mixed drinks, sip them, and then talk a little bit about them. We're currently working our way through the IBA's official list of cocktails. We're in the Unforgettables section right now, and this week we are on the Boulevardier. Now, the Boulevardier has quite a bit in common with the Americano that we made a couple of weeks ago, but I think it makes more sense to view it as a relative of the Negroni than it does as an Americano with stuff added to it. What is it? Well, basically, it is Campari and sweet vermouth, just like the Americano, but with the addition of a strong base spirit, either rye or bourbon whiskey. And that's basically all it is. Now, the IBA for this drink does not give any history at all. The history that I've seen bounced about, including on the Wikipedia page, seems to be accurate, which is that there was a fabulously named person called Erskine Gwynn, who was an American living in Paris in the 20s, and he started a magazine called the Boulevardier. And he created this drink at some point, and it appeared in that magazine at some point, presumably. I haven't seen any clippings of that in the magazine, but that's apparently what happened. And friend of the show, Harry McAlone, who's been mentioned in most episodes so far, knew Erskine and credited this drink to him as well. So that seems to be our origin story. Pretty simple. The drink also pretty simple. Let's go ahead and mix up the first one. All right, so we've got a big ice cube, a couple of small ice cubes for variety, and in our mixing glass, we are going to combine 30 milliliters, or 1 ounce, of sweet vermouth. I'm using the Antica formula from Carpano. And we're going to need 30 milliliters as well of the Campari, so 1 ounce pour. And we're going to need our base spirit. We're going to need 1.5 ounces, or 45 milliliters, of either rye or bourbon. We're going to make it both ways. I'm going to start with the bourbon because I think that'll be a little bit more mild. This is McFarland's Reserve. It's my current go-to for whiskey that really punches above its price point. This is like a $20 bottle of whiskey that I think is really quite good. It's 90 proof, which is nice as well. All right, so with all that in there, let's give it a little stir. And let's pour that into ideally a chilled coupe glass. Now, for the garnish of this drink, the IBA calls for either a twist of orange or lemon. It makes it sound like the orange is preferred and the lemon is an optional swap, but the photo shows the lemon. So we're going to go with the lemon, but before I properly cut a twist of one, let me show you the, what I find silly, garnish that the IBA has come up with for it. It's this thing with a circle of lemon with fingers coming off it. There's probably a name for this. I'm sure people are much better at making them than I am. And it just sits in the drink like that. I hate this. I don't like anything about this. This is not doing anything for the drink. Theirs certainly looks better than mine, but I don't really like how theirs looks either. I don't want that. So I made that for you, but we're not using it. We're just going to grab a regular little bit of lemon here. We are going to twist that over the drink, and I'm just going to throw it right in there. The IBA spec, Boulevardier with bourbon. Oh yeah, that's great. So it's got the Campari vibes you definitely notice, those bitter herbs. And they're all in the back of the palate. They're all just there constantly throughout. But what happens is right at the beginning, you get the sweetness of the vermouth. And then there's a little bit more complexity that happens in the middle, which is the whiskey. And this is not an incredibly harsh or strong whiskey, but I get some of those caramelly notes, which the sweetness of the vermouth are encouraging, but the notes themselves are from the whiskey. Yeah, so sweet into a little bit of caramel and a little bit of barrel flavor, a little bit of vanilla, with just the Campari staying constant right under the surface the whole time. I love that. Excellent. So one other thing I'm curious about with this drink is the orange versus lemon dispute. So I've used the lemon in this drink, obviously, and I don't think it'll make a massive difference, but I was curious, what happens if we do both by incorporating a little bit of orange bitters? And I have not tried this, but I'm going to put... those were really small dashes. So it was 3, but barely a drop came out, so that was barely a dash. I need to get some of the little dash toppers for my bitters. I'm curious if that does anything to the drink. I can smell it, interestingly, immediately on the nose. Wow. Absolutely. So what it does, the orange integrates with the Campari. So I still have a very similar sweet into slightly caramelly barrel thing happening on section A of the palate, but on that undercurrent, I get lemon, or orange, integrated in with the Campari. That's now got slightly less bitterness, and there's a slight sweetness to that. I think that's very good. I think actually, even though my dashes were tiny, I would use less than what I used. So I used what would be equivalent to roughly 1 good full dash. I'd cut that back a little bit and just get in a drop or 2. But I think that's a lot of fun. All right, let's make a rye version. All right, on to that rye version. We're again gonna have 1 big cube, a couple small cubes going in there. And I apologize if there were some issues with the close-up video for that first version. I seem to have a camera issue there, so we just swapped that camera out, and hopefully this will be better, even though I don't like this camera as much. So we again have 1 ounce, or 30 milliliters, of sweet or rosso vermouth, 1 ounce, plus a little on the table, of Campari, and 1.5 ounce of the great Bottled and Bond Rittenhouse Rye, one of my favorite things. Was out of stock everywhere, at least around here, for a while, and that was a rough month or 2. Okay, and with all of those together, I'm not going to add the orange bitters in this because I want to taste it as is. Let's give it a stir. I think that's really all it needs in terms of a stir. And let's get a coupe, which would preferably be chilled. And let's go ahead and pour that in. And there we are, just like last week's, of course, because we're stirring and straining that way, we're getting some really lovely crystal clear drinks that I just love the look of these. I love this shade of red. It's a great looking drink. And let's again just get a nice lemon twist. Twist it over. No, that's disappointing. The rye version of the Boulevardier. Yeah, so the rye asserts itself a lot more than the bourbon did, which is not shocking. Not in an alcohol-y way, though. This is, of course, 100 proof, so even a little bit more alcohol. That's not really showing through. The Campari and the vermouth are still doing a great job of creating a couple layers of flavor, but the spice of the rye, so the actual rye nature of it, that kind of explodes in the mouth first. It's almost like, it's like smokiness. It's not smoky, but it's that sort of a flavor that just opens up straight through your mouth of the rice spice. And then underneath, you get that Campari thing going on. I'm getting less of the vermouth at the beginning of the taste, that sweetness opening into the whiskey. We're starting with the whiskey, and the vermouth is really just providing the sweetness to take some of the edge of the whiskey off. Yeah, I actually think I prefer the bourbon. Let's see what happens to this with just a shot of orange bitters. Yeah, that's more like how much I want, just a couple drops. And I know this bottle must be like clogged up or something, because that is a trickle. Yep, again, that tiny amount, absolutely noticeable immediately. Do I prefer it? I don't think so. I think in this one, I preferred it without the orange. In this one, there's too much orange, but I prefer it with the orange. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for coming along as we mixed up the Boulevardier. Easy to make, easy to drink, beautiful to look at. What a great beverage. If you would please do all the YouTube things like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment, search for random videos of sloths on YouTube to watch after this one. All of those things would be appreciated. Also, please go to the blog at shakingandsiping.com. There will be a link in the description below to this week's post where we'll have more details about this drink as well as close-up photos thereof. We'll also have the blog updated tomorrow where we see what happens when I go out to a local cocktail bar and order the Boulevardier with no specifiers. Do they make it the same? Do they make it different? We shall find out when that posts tomorrow. Also follow me on Twitter at shaking_sipping. That's where you'll find the latest updates on videos coming out, blog posts coming out, other things happening in my or the cocktail world. And until next week, cheers.